Hey, V.
Hey, you. Long time no see.
Seriously, it's been a while.
Yeah.
You ready to do a show? Hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. It is April 11th, 2021. It is season 5, episode 15. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Bianca. I can't believe we're already 15 episodes into season 5. I feel like we just started the season.
I know, right?
The year is moving very, very quickly now.
It especially is now that we've got our first vaccine shots.
Yep.
And we're about, a week and a half away from our second?
We're 2 weeks away from that second one, and then 2 weeks away from that from total immunity.
Well, mostly immunity. Mostly
96% immunity.
So I'm super excited about it. Hey everybody, we hope you had a really awesome week. Anything big for us? We actually went on a little retreat, little vacation.
We did. It was really awesome. It was much needed too.
Yeah, we there's a little remote cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
And it was nice getting away from things.
We cooked all of our own food over an open flame. It was super good, caveman-y and awesome.
It was. But we still managed to have good coffee, so.
If I'm there, that is a requirement.
Yes. So before we dive into calls, let's go through our regular announcements. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. If you like what we do, and let me tell you what we do, the ACA is an organization that is dedicated to the promotion of compassionate atheism and the separation of religion and government. Donations and things like that to this nonprofit go to help good causes and to help us be able to put on shows like this and continue the conversation and continue to grow the community. So if you like what we do and you want to support us, please consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/talkheathen to me. That's patreon.com/talkheathen to me. We're 2/3 of the way through the episode. I think our top 5 patrons, I've got it up. I refresh it. So if you want to hear your name read today, patreon.com/talkheathen to me. That's not the only way you can help too. If you do also want to support us, there is a donate link right above the live chat. And other than that, I know that it is tough for a lot of people, and I feel like we're doing like the NPR show almost every single week, but the fact is, just hitting that like button, hitting subscribe, sharing this out with your friends, growing that base means that YouTube will be more likely to suggest the show, and we can get out in front of more people. So that is another great way to support us if you'd like to. That said, the Nonprofits is going to have a new episode at 3 p.m. Central. So we want to make sure that you know to head over to the Nonprofits after this. Yeah.
And if we wrap up in time, we will also be going over to Discord to continue conversations there. So hopefully we'll see you there after the show.
Absolutely. And we do. For those people who haven't joined us in the Discord, we actually have been, as long as we, end in time before the Nonprofits. We go over, we answer questions, we talk to people. There have been times we've actually taken a call that we weren't able to take on air. So come join us. The link is down in the lower third, tiny.cc/ACA Discord. That said, you ready to dive into calls?
I am ready. I want to talk to Scott.
Me too. Let's talk to Scott in South Carolina. Scott, you're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, it's good to talk with you guys. I've been listening for a long time.
Cool.
A couple of months, and
nice.
I find the show intriguing. I find myself. Let me identify myself first, so you know who you're talking to. I am definitely a theist, though I've never called myself that until I started watching you guys.
It's interesting,
I'm
right? As a Christian, I never really kind of saw theist as a title of mine until I saw this conversation too. So totally get it.
Well, I understand it to be a very broad term. Anybody who believes in any kind of God is a theist. So I get
Correct.
that. But I don't believe in any kind of God. I believe in a particular God. I've been a devout Christian for 50 years, since I was 12, which tells you how old I am. In fact, my birthday was just last week. So
wow, happy belated birthday.
I know it's weird to get congratulated for not dying. It's remarkable.
Hey, honestly, it's not too bad. I am turning 34 in 2 months, and I did the math. That means that I've officially outlived Jesus, which
Well,
I don't know. I guess
you look at it that way.
So what can we help you with today, Scott?
Yeah, what's up?
Well, again, let me further identify myself. I am, because the question gets asked, well, what kind of Christian are you? There's all kinds of denominations. I don't identify with any particular denomination, though I do identify as a Reformed, as far as what kind of Christian Reformed theology, if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
Are you?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay. But that's even the closest I get to identifying myself. It's hard to identify as an evangelical these days because it seems to take on more of a political definition than it does a religious one.
Mm-hmm.
So Reformed, I believe that I hold the Bible to be inerrant and infallible, the inspired word of God. I hold that man can only be saved from his separation from God by faith alone. I hold that even the faith I have is a gift from God to me. I hold that only through the death and resurrection of Jesus was the way paved for my relationship with God to be restored. And I hold that I live for and am made to bring glory to God. Those are the 5 solas. And so
that sounds about right.
That's the kind of Christian I am.
Okay. Thank you for that thorough explanation. That's going to help us a lot in this conversation.
Definitely. It's really nice when we're not worried about straw manning.
Based on backtracking, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot that we can dive into, but that said, you have a specific topic that you want to talk about, and we want to make sure that we're kind of meeting. I
do. I want to talk about evidence for God. I don't speak in terms of a proof for God because proof is a very subjective thing. One person's proof is another person's non-proof. So I speak in terms of evidence and preponderance of evidence.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say something there.
Oh, I think we may have some definitional issues, but I'm definitely willing to, flesh this out and see, and if there's a problem, then we can address it on the way.
Well, just recently I was looking at some video of looking back on the O.J. Simpson trial, and there was a wealth of evidence that a majority of people believed absolutely pointed to O.J. Simpson as the killer of his wife and her friend. But the jury didn't see it that way. And so that's sort of my contention, is that evidence and proof there's a subjective component to them that requires some other something else for people to consider besides just raw evidence and just objective evidence. There's something in their person, in their personality, in their character, in their experience, in their background that gives them an inclination one way or another.
So I if I might kind of tease this out just a little bit with you while we're working through this.
Sure.
When we're talking about evidence, would you agree with me that there's good evidence and bad evidence?
Unquestionably.
Cool. So like if I looked in my alphabet soup and I, saw Allah is God in there, would you consider that good or bad evidence for Allah?
It depends on what evidence you're presenting.
It was in my alphabet soup.
I'm not sure I know what you mean by that.
Alphabet soup? It's
I know what alphabet soup is, obviously.
Yeah, if the letters spelled out Allah in there, would you consider that good evidence?
Oh, literally alphabet soup. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I thought you were speaking metaphorically.
No. Word salad, but the opposite. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all good. Would you consider that good evidence or bad evidence?
Certainly not. I would consider it no evidence.
Actually, it is evidence, unfortunately, but it's just bad evidence. So you can have good evidence and you can have bad evidence. And so when we're talking about evidence, I want to make sure that we understand that evidence is not a very, this specific definition. It's a subset, and, you evaluate that evidence to determine how good that evidence is. And when it comes to proof,
yes, but
a proof really requires a demonstration. In mathematics, when you're talking about a proof, you're not, that's not subjective. When you're showing a proof of a thing, you are demonstrating the truth of that thing, by going through the motions to show that that is the fact. So I just want to make sure we don't fall back and forth between colloquial and mathematic or scientific versions of proof. But I'm nitpicking. Go ahead.
No, then nitpick all you want. That's fine. But regarding evidence, though, that's why we don't look at one piece of evidence as proof. That's why it has to be gathered with other evidence than to point in a singular direction. That's at least as far as I can tell.
Go ahead, B.
Yeah, I would say that if we're talking about, say, gathering scientific data, one piece of evidence might be a singular hypothesis that would be tested. And if it held up, then that one hypothesis would be added into a larger group of hypotheses, right? And then we would ultimately come out with a theory. So it would be a situation where one piece of evidence is not what we base a whole theory on. We base it on, we look at each one and we make sure that each one is accurate and strong in and of itself. But the best way to build a worldview is to gather as many hypotheses as possible and present that as a whole. Now, the only concern I would have is whether or not those individual hypotheses bore out, right? Because we can have a whole lot of really bad evidence, and that by itself won't be convincing, right? If the individual pieces aren't convincing, then the whole won't be.
I fully agree. In fact, I think I heard Eric say maybe last week or the week before, maybe 2 years ago, I can't remember which episode it was, that basically a stack of crap is still a stack of crap. Whether
essentially,
you can pile it as high as you want. It's just still a pile of crap.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I absolutely agree. Which is why we I can't speak for anybody else. Why I reject all other religions because. It's my contention and that of course billions for the last 2,000 years that Christianity points to Jesus as who we claim he is. So without getting into too much of that, very quickly, my preponderance of evidence goes from the design of nature to the Bible itself, to the problem of evil, to humankind and our uniqueness in nature. But the problem of evil is where I wanted to focus.
Sure. And by the way, if that's something that you want to go on to, then I'm glad you recognize that it would be a number of calls that we'd be happy to take and talk about each one.
Can I just say, this person is very well organized.
Super well organized. You can tell they watch the show.
I am very much enjoying this conversation, Scott.
Yeah. I mean, you're cutting to the meat so we can get to the juicy parts.
Yeah, the last thing I want to do is waste your time or mine. So
I appreciate it, especially for this format.
But I've watched Matt quite a bit. I've watched you guys quite a bit, and the problem of evil comes up very seldom for some reason. I don't know.
I can tell you why.
Even consider it.
Well, I can tell you why. So the problem of evil was something that was really interesting to me when I was on my way out, because I was contending with this idea that a God that I thought was all loving couldn't be, given the world that we're in. And I thought, this problem of evil, it made me really start to question kind of the nature of the God that I thought existed. And so it was super in the front of my mind. And I was just like, wow, problem of evil. If a God does exist, they're not very nice. They're not a very good person. You definitely couldn't describe them as all loving. But over time, the further out I moved, the more I realized it's kind of a moot point, because I don't think that there's a God in the first place. It's almost like us talking about one of our favorite book series. If we're talking about The Lord of the Rings and I talk about, whether or not Sauron was good or bad, it's niche and it could be a really fun conversation, but it's just speculating on fiction. And I think that's why it doesn't come up as much.
When we talk about evil, that's a very big word. So I think we need to define what we're talking about.
Sure.
Okay.
When I talk about evil, I'm speaking. I think what you're alluding to, and I've heard you talk about before, is the problem of what looks to be unjust suffering on the planet and in the world, and that's certainly a problem and a question and a huge question. What I'm talking about is evil in humankind, man against man, person against person, whether it's a nation against a nation, a people group against a people group, or just from me to you. Evil exists, and I have trouble seeing how that's explainable without what the Bible describes as God.
Sure. Well,
I realize many.
Let's dive in a little bit more into evil, because I think we can actually show you where the problem is. Do you think evil is a thing that exists tangibly in this world?
Tangibly with palpably, tangibly.
Palpably, yes. Do you think I can hold up like a jar of evil?
I hope not.
Sounds like a Stephen King novel.
Right?
Well, unless it's coffee without cream and sugar, I'd say no.
Heathen.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is the first time we've had a Christian Colin with sacrilege to the
yeah,
host.
right. How dare you?
Well, that'd be
Scott,
a whole other phone call.
Essentially, where I'm going with this is when we're talking colloquially about evil, we're talking about someone breaking the social contract, right? Doing things that are harmful to others. And I like that you're using the term suffering. And I think as long as we're talking about evil that way, it's more of an adjective, and it's not a noun, and it's not a verb. I don't evil someone, right? The thing that I did can be described as evil, right? I don't own evil. It's in the same way that if I walked out in front of a sprinkler, I would be, wet. And so, that description would fit there. And so when you're talking about the context,
though you can wet someone.
No, but someone can be wet. Right? In the same way that an action can be evil, and again, we're talking colloquially as in causing suffering.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly.
Sure.
So is your contention that people themselves are not evil?
I think evil actions are evil, and circumstances can appear evil. The thing is, we use evil so commonly in our language that it has been used as a noun, it's been used as a verb, it's been used as an adjective, and because of that, we find ourselves kind of blending between things. It's really hard to pin down and talk about because of that. And so that's why we're starting this conversation by pinning it down a little bit.
No, I really want to pin it down because
cool.
Because we agree universally, atheist, Christian, Hindu, whoever, we agree that Hitler, Jeffrey Dahmer, Jim Jones, these are people, in your terminology, people who did great evil. Now, we call them themselves, in their core, evil people. Most people would say yes. Would you say yes?
Well, I don't know, because here's the thing. I have a lot of experience in special ed, mental health. And because of that, I see, and I have seen definitely people who, because of their illness, if they go down a really bad path, could do some really terrible things. But with medication and a structured environment and an understanding of, your body and what you're going through and support in doing those things, then I think that can be averted. So I don't think that someone is evil. I think the things that a person can do would be evil. Like, I agree with you. Jeffrey Dahmer and Hitler, they did evil things.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here real quick? Because I do want to make sure that we get to the core of this. Scott, I'm sorry, if you wanted to respond to that, you can.
I know what you're going to say. How does this provide evidence for God?
Well, no, not necessarily. That is the direction we definitely want to go. But where I'm coming from is, you said that this was the best explained by your religion and your belief and your God, the existence of evil, is specifically human agent evil in the world, right?
Yes, among other things, but yes.
Okay, so I have an alternate hypothesis for you, and I would love to run it by you, and I would love to see where you see the holes in mine, and if yours doesn't have those holes.
Sounds great.
Okay, so there is an all evil God, omni-evil, who created a world where humans were given the free will to be truly, earnestly evil. And due to some fluke, we actually sometimes instead choose to be good. And this is actually the reason why people are good when they try. And then, but there's always that evil component in the world, and there are always evil people. So where does mine go wrong that yours doesn't?
Well, first of all, it's not real. But aside from that, I know it's a hypothesis.
Wait,
where does it go wrong? Yeah.
Well, I don't think we're worried yet about.
I heard Eric start to stutter.
I started to, but then you spoke, and I wanted you to be able to respond to me.
Right. At this point, we're not worried about real yet.
Actually, I was going to let Eric speak because I'm festering on this one. So Eric,
no, go for it. Just think that through. What I'm going to say is that I don't care if it's real yet. We can get through to the proofs of things, but if we're talking about the best explanation for a thing in terms of evidence, in terms of a theory,
Scott, by the way, we're vamping for you to think about it. Go ahead.
Then this would be a great alternate theory where all of the same arguments about the problem of evil could be made and flipped, and the same result of humans who are sometimes good and sometimes evil could happen.
Okay, Scott, what do you think?
Hypothesis. In your hypothesis, it sounds like evil is good and good is evil. And it seems the same idea.
Well, essentially, because I would be going off of the idea that there is an objective moral standard, which is that God. And if that God is omni-evil, then evil would be the preferred way to be.
Yes, but I would also add that moral standard permeates the planet, whether we're Christians or not, whether we're Jews or not, whether we're Muslims or not.
Right.
Somehow we all have bought in to that standard to varying degrees.
Mm-hmm. Which would make sense if my all evil God created everything. It doesn't matter if we believe in that all evil God, we still are, influenced by his creative force.
Exactly. And there would be an understanding around the globe that to murder someone for my own convenience, for my own purposes, to steal something because I want it, to cheat on my wife anytime I felt inclined, that those are all acceptable and good things.
No, they're evil.
They're evil.
Morality around the world.
No, you're swapping good and evil. We're recognizing it's evil.
Right. No, the point is to recognize that it's evil and to induce suffering.
Oh, I see. So in this hypothesis, the God who created us and made everything evil, we recognize it as evil, and that it's a bad God that did this.
Exactly.
And the God wants us to be evil.
Right. It's essentially Satan.
Quite honestly, I don't know what to do with that hypothesis.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make here is that we can use the problem of evil and flip it and still come out with something that looks very similar to Earth. It still looks very similar to what we have here. So I would contend that your hypothesis is not actually the only one that explains why we are this way, even if we're just taking your argument and flipping it around and not even bringing secular or scientific or evolutionary biology into it.
I would agree. I think there are lots of explanations as to why we have evil, and some of them may be right as far as they go. What I'm contending is that any explanation that has come subsequent to what the Bible presents has come subsequent, and that the Bible is the first and most complete explanation of why we have evil on this planet.
I mean, first let's. There's a lot here to unpack there. I mean, Scott, do you recognize that there are religions that are older than Torah, and that those religions dealt with the same and similar issues?
The Code of Hammurabi.
Yes, but I'm going back. I'm going back to the garden. I'm going back to day one.
Yeah, no, you're going back to a myth that you haven't yet substantiated to the point that I'm not going to grant that in the conversation.
Right. There were gods and creation myths for tens of thousands of years prior to the writing down of Genesis.
Actually, I'm glad you brought this up, I'm so glad you brought this up, because the Bible itself, and Christians miss this, lots of people miss this, and it's not because I'm special, but a lot of people don't miss it. So I just have read, and this is what I get. The Bible itself, how can I say it? That the Bible claims that there are thousands of gods, small g, real gods, real entities. And it doesn't claim that God is the only God. It claims that he is the creator God who created these gods.
Which is why thou shalt not have
throughout.
any other gods before me. It was so potent back in the time. Yeah, I'm with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Psalm 82, Deuteronomy 32.
Yeah, but
Job 1.
Let's make sure we're tying
Sons of
back
God.
in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I look at the Bible, I don't see, what I see is a trajectory, one full story. And the main topic of the Bible is sin, just that little word, sin. How man separated himself from God, decided to go his own way, and the rest of and from Genesis 2 through Revelation 21. There's only 2 chapters in the Bible that have no sin in them, the first and the last. And
Wait,
Okay,
hold on.
Is God?
This is interesting, Scott, but I'm confused how this is answering the question of why do you think Genesis came before all other creation myths if there are literally thousands of years of creation myths, Zoroastrianism, Babylon, Code of Hammurabi,
that predate.
Well, because if the Bible is to be believed, which
There's the
I
answer.
do.
Yeah, do you understand what you're saying is, but if I'm right, I'm right?
No, I
If
get
the
that.
Bible,
And
the
there's no
if
way
is
to
doing a lot of heavy
substantiate.
lifting there, Scott. I'm not going to allow the if to do all the heavy lifting. If we lived in a world where people could fly, then we can have conversations about flying people. If the Bible were to be believed, then you may be right about a lot of statements that you're going to make. I don't grant that the Bible is to be believed. And so if the Bible is to be believed, is just moving into fan fiction.
But then we'd have to go into a long discussion of why the Bible is to be believed, and I don't think you have time for that.
No,
Not
but
today,
I want you to call and
but
tell
we
us
could
why.
certainly have that conversation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what's interesting, Scott, and what I really, really want to kind of leave you with here is if God commands you to be good and you were to meet someone who was good, I'm using air quotes because I'm depending on your colloquial understanding of good. Would you know that person was good, or would you know that, or would you just take that person was being good because they were being commanded to?
There's not enough information in the question.
Sure. Thou
judge
shalt not
someone
steal.
for the
You
first
meet someone
time-
who's not who hasn't stolen before. And so you're like, cool, that person doesn't steal. Do you have any indication about the character of that person other than the fact that they're following a rule, not that they're, maybe they want to steal, maybe they want to murder, maybe they want to rape, maybe they want to do tons and tons of, what we would consider, suffering and evil things. But if they're just following the rules, if they're just doing what was set out for them, then I would contend that they're just automatons. They don't get to take credit for being good, and they don't get to take credit for staying away from, creating suffering, because all they're doing is following those rules. You're creating automatons.
Absolutely. And this is what God did not do, according to the Bible. God did not create automatons. He created people to be in a relationship with him. When we decided to pull away from that relationship, evil ensued.
Okay. So, have you ever met somebody who said, I know I have a black eye, trigger warning for people who deal with domestic abuse. But when somebody says, I know I have a black eye, but I really deserved it. I mouthed off to my boyfriend. It was my fault. Can you see how
I'm intimately acquainted with a situation like that?
Yeah. And unfortunately a lot of people are, because that sounds like the God you're describing now. the fact is, when we talk about the problem of evil, it's because God doesn't stand up.
No, I don't get that. No. Substantiate that. How does that sound like an abuse of God?
Sure. God really, really wants us all to be in heaven, right?
Not as a first. That's like saying I want my wife to be in the same room with me. That's not the goal for her to be in the same room with me.
Okay, so then let's be super clear. God wants us to be saved, right?
Saved from what? I mean,
Scott,
these are terms that we throw around, but I'm not sure we know what we mean.
The point that I'm trying to get to is
saying someone had a choice in a matter when actually the person inflicting punishment is in a position of power is abuse. Regardless, like across the board, right? If somebody is in a position of power and the other person has some free will, sure, we'll grant that, some agency. If there is still a power imbalance there, right? And so that is still abusive. Even if we were to grant everything, the free will, the sin, the punishment at the end of days, all of it, it would still be abusive by virtue of the fact that one of the agents, the one who is dealing out punishment, is so much more powerful.
Mm-hmm. No, I can see why you say that, and it makes sense as far as it goes.
Do you have kids, Scott?
But from a relational, I have a daughter. Yeah.
How old's your daughter?
She'll kill me. 35, almost 35.
35. Okay. So we're gonna go back in time and pretend your daughter's a toddler for just a moment. Would you hand your toddler a gun?
2-year-old. So I have a granddaughter who's 2.
Okay. Would you hand your granddaughter a loaded gun?
No, certainly not.
How about a butcher's knife?
No.
And if that granddaughter did something to upset you, would you lock them in the basement and burn the house down?
Certainly not.
Sounds like that's what your God would do. And on top of that, your God's going to say it's the child's fault for doing it. If you consider yourself a child of God, that is a 1-to-1 comparison. So if we want to point out something separate, I've got the book of Eric right here, and it doesn't do those things.
Yeah, I've seen your book of Eric. I've looked for it. Is it on Amazon? Because I've looked for it.
Not yet.
Not yet, no. But the idea would be that I think that a holy book that doesn't include gaslighty, abusive language that makes people feel justified for horrendous punishments in those kinds of abuses of power is a better book.
Well, then you're not understanding the story of the Bible, because
I understand the story of the Bible, Scott. I understand the story of the Bible, and also I understand that your statements about about evil and sin earlier in the Old Testament, God killed in the Noah story friggin' everything, right? God rained down fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, decimating an entire people. Oh my gosh, it's been 30 minutes. Scott, please call back. Obviously, this is the kind of conversation I would love for you to, at some point after COVID, come down and have a beer with us. But
I know. I thoroughly enjoy this. This is the kind of stuff that really gets me kind of percolating. So awesome. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Same here.
And also just so you walk away with something, the live chat has been fantastic and wonderfully, beautifully pedantic. Wet can be a verb. But what I love is that we get to unleash that inner pedant and really kind of dive into the nitty gritty. So even for those people who are saying, they would do it this way or that way, we're just glad you joined the conversation. Scott, thank you for watching, man.
Hey, thanks for the time. Appreciate it, guys.
Take care. Was there anything else for Scott?
No, we're good.
What did you think?
I think we got taken on a journey.
We did, because there were so many just juicy things, and he brought them up, and I know that, you know, there are a lot of people who are, oh gosh, you could have stopped him on this, and oh gosh, you could have stopped him on that. But he wanted to specifically talk about evil, and for us to talk about evil, we need to make a lot of assumptions, because I think it is worth saying that if a God exists, that God is not loving. And so in order for us to do that, we need to grant we understand the God concept that they're talking about to the degree that we can have the conversation. We're going to assume that that God exists in order for us to have that conversation, and make a lot of concessions to get there. But it is worth having, just so that we could get to that place and talk about.
I'm actually very interested. He said, he like laid out his entire thought process. He said, I come from the place of the universe that is designed. That gets me to the Bible. That gets me to the problem of evil. And that gets me to human uniqueness. So, like, if we wanted to have just like a 4-part conversation with Scott, if you're still watching, like, call in for one of each of those, and we'll see if it actually gets us to where you're going, because that's the closest to a roadmap that I've heard a theist give me on this show. So I want to dive in farther. I
agree. And I'm excited about that simply because I think that each of those things is crap. And
yes,
if we can
absolutely.
we can show that each is just piled on, maybe we can kind of adjust and shift that conversation. We have so many theist callers. I am absolutely stunned, and I am dying to talk to Terry. Terry in
Hello.
Oklahoma, you're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I was listening to Scott and some of the things that he said, and I find it common with a lot of Christians to have this circumlocution when anytime you bring up a word, like you said something about God wants everyone to be saved. Well, then he had to qualify saved, even though everybody in the Christian world would have a accepted understanding of that. And that
Terry,
kind of
thank
idea
you. So there are so many times. Do you understand that saying that's to be saved is Christianese? Like, for people who weren't born and like lived in the church, people don't know what we're talking about. Like, we're trying to meet you, and we're trying to use the language.
Exactly.
I appreciate.
You're trying to make them feel comfortable by using the verbiage that they use and the terminology, and then they want you to qualify it on your own standards, even though they won't accept them on their own. And that's one of the things that I find frustrating.
So the second Christian caller who we're going to talk to, or the second religious caller, that was an affirmation I'm going to take with me all day. Terry, you are already on
Terry
Eric's good side. Yeah, you get brownie points. What did you want to talk about today,
I love
though?
That. Now, all right, let me confess one thing. I've only watched one episode, and that was a couple of weeks ago, but I thought the show was thoughtful and polite and worthwhile. So I wanted to call back to you, and I have a variety of topics we could discuss, but I think the first thing I'd like to mention
just be aware that we're probably only going to have time for one. We spent a half hour on that last call, and I feel really bad.
All right, so okay, yeah, he got going there, and I appreciate everything he was coming from. But like the idea that there is physical evidence on the earth for the veracity of the biblical narrative.
Okay,
cool.
Like what?
That's what I would want to present. Okay,
sure.
Let's say Jebel al-Lawz. Do you know what that mountain is?
Could you spell it?
JEBLAL-LAWZ.
Yes, I do, actually.
Now, starting in the 60s, several people made excursions there and found a variety of things. And among the things that are found there are the fact that the mountain goes up to a certain point, and then there was a line of demarcation, and then everything above that is a different color. It's black, and below it is kind of a peach color. Mm-hmm. And if you break the rocks open that are black, they're actually the peach-colored rocks that have been scorched.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be exactly what you would expect to find if that mountain had been on fire when Moses went to the mountain.
You know what's funny? I don't know if it was investigated by other people, but that investigation was. I understood it when I was investigating Ron Wyatt. Are you specifically talking about Ron Wyatt?
Well, there's been several people subsequent to Ron Wyatt, but Ron was like one of the first Anglos to be in that part of the world. But there is a oil field engineer named Jim Caldwell, Jim and Penny, his wife. He was an ExxonMobil, I believe, oil field engineer, and ended up in Saudi Arabia, and then made a venture out there and discovered a lot of the same things. Basically,
I gotcha.
Basically the same things that Ron had found. But if you follow the biblical narrative, then the description of Jebel al-Lawz as Mount Sinai makes perfect sense. If you try to make the argument that the term Red Sea is accurate, which it is not, it's actually called the Yam Suf that was crossed.
Okay.
That
So
you end up in a different location than people claim.
Well, let's start with the Sinai thing, and just for people who were not religious, who have no idea what we're talking about, early in the Old Testament, Moses goes up this Mount Sinai and speaks to God, and God gives Moses the 10 Commandments, and the idea of the blackened top of the mountain is part of that story.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the deal, Terry. When it comes to archaeology, there's a process.
Yes.
And that process takes time, right? It takes investigating. It takes plotting out each area, and very, very carefully making sure that you're understanding what substrate is what, and how that goes across. Did you know I was actually handed a piece of rock from? I was told that it was from that mountain.
Oh, interesting. Well, I did not know that. No.
Absolutely. It was volcanic rock.
Well, then it would not be the rock that was taken from that mountain, because that is not a volcanic mountain.
That was the rock taken back by Ron Wyatt.
If you're saying someone handed you a rock that was given to them by Ron Wyatt, that may or may not be true.
So I traveled to the Ron Wyatt Museum, and actually met with the people who worked with Ron Wyatt, the authors who continue to sell books that are sold by him. As far as investigating that is concerned, I have deeply investigated that, and I was handed by that person in particular, who says he was there with Ron in the Ron Wyatt Museum, and said, "This is a rock from the top of that mountain," and that rock was volcanic rock.
Okay. Was it volcanic rock in the sense that we know it had to have emerged from the center of the earth, or was it volcanic rock in the sense that it was a rock that was subjected to substantial heat and has the same properties as a volcanic rock would?
No. When we're talking about, we have igneous rock, we have metamorphic rock, and sedimentary rock, right? So it was not sedimentary, and what's importantly is it was not metamorphic, right? Metamorphic rock, you're talking about the heat and pressure, but when you're talking about igneous rock, this was volcanic glass. This would have only been created by a volcano. So specifically, the example that you are calling to give, I have personally investigated and debunked thoroughly.
Okay.
So if that is in your repertoire, please remove that.
Oh no. Oh, you
won't?
Well, I'm not going to. I'm not going to concede that entirely, because there are people still investigating it to this day.
Speaking of the Associates for Biblical Research, the website BibleArchaeology.org also discredits this particular mountain as being Sinai.
Okay. It would be difficult then to explain why there are carvings of Egyptian-style bulls at the base of the mountain. Why there would be...
That was also debunked. And in fact, that specific trip, I think, was the one where Ron and his sons were arrested, is it not?
I think that was.
Yeah, they traveled through illegally into I believe it was it Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Into Saudi. Yeah, they went
Yeah.
from Jordan to Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Yeah. His sons went on record later
However,
admitting that
there
he planted.
have been subsequent
His
journeys
sons
there by people, and also the Saudi government has
Terry.
fenced the area off and put a sign that says it's an archaeological site.
So Terry, his sons
Yeah.
later on admitted to having planted evidence with their father. Not only that, but we are no longer talking about archaeology. We're talking about someone who thinks that they're Indiana Jones. I'm actually working on a series on it with my buddy Holy Kool-Aid. I suggest you check out his channel. And we are going to be going into that. We've already gone into Ron Wyatt's account of discovering Sodom and Gomorrah. And I am eyeball deep in it currently. So I will tell you now.
I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see what comes out on the other side.
I would love that. And I would love for you to watch it and call back, because here's the thing, Terry, that kind of evidence, it is so degrading to the profession of archaeology. It is so, I mean, dude, do you know how when Ron Wyatt said he found the Tower of Babel, do you know how he found the Tower of Babel, Terry?
I don't know anything about the Tower of Babel, about him.
Yeah, he was flying in an airplane.
In fact, I know, hang on one second. Let's go back. Let's step back. Basically, I know who Ron Wyatt is. I'm familiar with what he's done, but I'm not really basing what I am seeing solely on his work. There have been subsequent people, and a lot of what they have done to follow up is stuff that I have followed.
Totally understood. What they have not done is archaeology. And that's the point.
Then we might shift to archaeology then.
And I think that's a wonderful field to study. I suggest you look up a channel called Religion for Breakfast that goes over a bunch of those sites. And I think that would be a really, really great resource for you.
Okay, that'd be fine. I will certainly say that again. Religion for Breakfast.
The dude's not even an atheist, I don't think, but he's just a PhD archaeologist. And he is entirely he loves talking about the history of the Holy Land and that whole area. And I think that'd be interesting for you to check out.
Okay, well, that'd be great. Let's say the Babylonian Chronicles.
Terry?
Nebuchadnezzar's campaign in Jerusalem.
Terry?
Yes?
I would love to talk about the Babylonian exile. You have no idea how much it breaks my heart, but we have to have time for other callers. Please check out those channels and call back, okay?
Hey, listen, I absolutely will. I appreciate you guys' courtesy and the whole thing. I think that what you guys are doing is definitely worthwhile. I'm definitely going to be calling you back, and have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks,
take care,
Terry.
brother.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, I've been so ready for that. You have no idea. Months I've been waiting for someone to talk about it.
I knew. I was just sitting back.
It made me so happy. So I mean, for people who are watching and going, wow, this is so niche and esoteric, I have no idea what's going on. Here's the thing. There is a narrative in the Old Testament. The narrative is that Jews were slaves in the land of Egypt, that they left, that they spent 40 years in the desert, that they went into the land of Canaan, that they fought with a bunch of tribes, and that you wind up having the establishment of a united kingdom, and just continuing. And what you're seeing in a lot of those early books is what I would say the justification by that group to tell their own story.
Yeah.
And I think every society has their story, right? And how you identify that.
Well, that's like the United States has a mythology too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? And you can go back, was there a cherry tree? No, there wasn't. There was not, like, that was
But George
made up.
Washington existed.
Right. But did he pray at Valley Forge? Well, that was also an artist's interpretation, right? Like there are so many ways in which we build a mythology around our own culture and our history. It makes perfect sense that this would be part of that. I was so excited for you that you got to do that.
Thank you. I know I just totally like railroaded through the whole thing, and I'm sorry. I really did love that.
That's fine. But one thing that I will say, I loved Terry. Very civil caller, very nice guy, sounds like. I am hesitant to continue conversations with somebody who, when they are so thoroughly proven wrong about a particular thing, they refuse to say, oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to do more research and not bring that up until I have validated what you have said, right? You don't need to like believe us on the spot and be like, oh, my mind has completely changed. But if we are going to continue a conversation with you, we need to know that if we are making valid points, that you are accepting and hearing those and entering that into the dialogue, because otherwise we're just going to go around and around. So I'm very excited that Terry's going to call back. My hope is that he will have done a little bit of that research, have validated what you brought to the table, and will be moving on to other things.
It is so important, especially those particular narratives, because often in the comments, and not just under Talk Heathen videos, but lots of other videos, and even in my church as a kid, the idea, the preponderance of evidence, they found all of these things. They found Noah's Ark. They found
the chariot
wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea.
That one stayed with me up until I learned about Ron Wyatt.
Yeah, right.
And that was like, and that's the other thing. Like, you might not know how much of your belief system is influenced by an individual person, because it's not necessary. It has become incorporated into the talking points without that tag of like, oh, by the way, this person did this thing. So if you are convinced that there are chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea, or that they found the Tower of Babel, or Sodom and Gomorrah, or any of these other things, chances are you have actually been very deeply impacted by this one individual person.
Totally.
In the same way that so many Christians are not aware that they are interpreting the text, not canonically, but rather, well, canonically, sure, but not historically accurately, but rather through the lens of the church fathers of the early, like, Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. So the fact that there can be Christians who say, oh, well, this is clearly what the Bible says about original sin. Who's Augustine? Like,
yeah,
like there is so much background and history that when you dig into it, honestly, for me, if you want to get somebody out of a fundamentalist mindset, not necessarily into atheism, but out of that fundamentalist, inerrantist worldview, study where these things come from. And
look for the indicators as well of what good research looks like, what archaeology and what the process of archaeology looks like, and making sure that the sources that you're citing have actually done the legwork, have the credentials, and have demonstrated that what they've done has met those burdens of proof set out by the field that they're in.
Exactly.
So it's crazy, and it actually is a real bummer. And I hate that it happens to archaeology, because you find somebody who passes themselves off as a medical doctor, they're going to be found out pretty quickly. You find somebody who passes themselves off as an archaeologist, it can be a lot harder.
Thanks, Indiana Jones. Can we talk with Andrew in Ohio? Andrew's been waiting for a while.
I'd love to. Andrew in Ohio, you're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, I call in on the day all the Christians are calling in, of course.
That's okay.
That's the God of the Bible.
Yeah, it makes it go super fast, because that's our jammy jams. That's what we love to do.
Well, yeah, I believe in the God of the Bible. He is the Alpha and the Omega, and I believe. Well, that's what I believe.
Okay, why?
I believe the Bible's true. It has multiple authorship. It has from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It's I believe in the God of the Bible. He has proclaimed his word through. That's the only way he could reveal himself to us when we are separated from him.
Sure. Okay. So let's break this down a little bit, because I want to determine whether or not those things are reliable, because sounds like you're basing that on the idea that the Bible is accurately proclaiming things. Do you think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
Absolutely.
They didn't.
How do you know that?
You can actually go to even some of the most fundamentalist Christian universities and find that the authorship for many of the books is unknown.
I actually believe that I had a Bible when I was a Christian. I think it might have even been a King James Version Bible, where in the kind of page before each gospel started, they actually explicitly said, this is canonically, historically said by the church to have been written by Matthew, but that might not be the case.
Right. And on top of that, so we don't know all of the authors. And so that really kind of hurts the credibility of that. Number two, when we're talking about authors in the Bible, I think that, would you agree that the Apostle Paul was a major player in writing books in the Bible?
Yes, and I could use Paul to prove that Luke wrote Luke.
Cool. So let's start with Paul. Was Paul there to see the miracles that Jesus did? Was Paul a disciple?
He had miracles in the book. Well, he had special revelation. He got special revelation from God during his conversion.
Okay, so did Paul ever meet Jesus?
Yes. Well, you're talking about before the resurrection? No.
I'm talking about at all. So the idea of Paul encountering a ghost is incredibly problematic. There are lots of people who say that they encounter ghosts, and there are lots of people who say that they have revelations from God, but that doesn't mean, and I'm really confident, Andrew, that you would not believe anyone that said that they had a revelation from God. Some people could be telling the truth. Some people would need to be lying, especially when we have accounts that conflict with each other. How would you tell the difference between somebody who actually had a revelation from God and someone who didn't?
Well, you're suggesting that Paul had a delusion, I'm assuming?
So I probably, if people want to know, look up The Road to Damascus and that whole thing. It really, honestly, where I'm going here is, how do we tell the difference, right? Let's say whatever happened, because I mean, Andrew, if you, let's say, I don't know, ate, some psychedelics and tripped out and you said, Eric, this was my experience, I will believe you and be like, cool, that was your experience. I don't think that maps to reality, but I absolutely think that, the chemicals in your brain and everything that was going on, like, you had the experience. It just doesn't map to what was really going on. You were probably just sitting in the room, drooling a little bit. And so the question isn't, calling them a liar, saying that they had the experience. The question is, does it map to reality? And so to bring that into the world that we're in, if somebody says they have revelation from God that says do X, and another person who says, I have revelation from God, and it says don't do X, both of them cannot be true. How do you tell the difference?
Well, I trust in what the text is telling me, if that makes sense.
No, that their revelation is the. They're not quoting the Bible. They're giving you revelation.
Paul did not establish Christianity. He, I guess, Paul is not the only reason we have Christianity today.
No, and we can get through that. But right now, I'm talking about Paul, because Paul was a big player.
Well, he confirms that Luke was the beloved physician in Colossians, so he proves that. That's another documentation that Luke wrote Luke. So we have multiple books of the Bible that talk about Luke.
So let's
that goes in your, before
hold on.
There are so
Andrew,
many questions asked.
Yeah, Andrew. The question that is at the core of this is, if somebody were to say that today, we would be very skeptical, and I think rightfully so. When it comes to determining whether or not somebody was tripping out or actually experienced something that maps to reality, we don't have a good way of determining who's the liar or who is actually has the beat on the truth. And because of that, it's very, very difficult to take that. It's very difficult to take that for somebody who did it yesterday. And we're talking about someone who did it a little less than 2,000 years ago. About 1,600? No, 1,400 years ago? Something like that?
Something like
What are we
that.
talking about, Paul?
Yeah. Now, go back to the Old Testament. Who wrote Exodus and Leviticus?
Moses. Moses wrote the first
Moses?
5 books.
If Moses wrote those books, it talks about Moses' death. Did he come back as a zombie just to write the last part and make sure it was filled out?
No, Joshua did that.
Okay, so you said Moses wrote it. Is it one or the other?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
No. Well, Moses gave it to the priest. Think about this, Eric, before you say something. He gave it to the priest, and Joshua's the next book. And Joshua knew Moses, so it goes along with that.
Yeah, so you're saying that Joshua just happened to go back into Moses' writings just to finish that out for him. That sounds like fan fiction that you cannot substantiate. The fact is that there are so many holes in the Old Testament and New Testament. There are so many things that we would credit to, or that we wouldn't credit to people nowadays, that we're for some reason crediting to anonymous authors. A lot of these authors were anonymous. A lot of Christian scholars even, and non-Christian scholars have gone in and said, okay, some of these things were added, some of these things were changed. And even in evaluating the style of writing, you can see that a lot of stuff was added way after the fact. I mean, and before I pass it over to V, because V's done a lot of study on this, one more, because we're talking about Joshua. You know, the whole circling, blowing the horns and circling 3 times. What was the walls of Jericho?
Jericho, yes.
You know that story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it actually doesn't match up. At the time that they were saying that the time frame doesn't match up. Jericho did not have walls at the time. The only reason it was referenced that way is because it was written so far after the fact that had turned into a city. And so it is historical fiction. It just is. And there's no way around that.
Well, on the Joshua, when the sun stayed in the air, that could have been I believe in miracles, but that it was probably something called a sun dog, or it's called a mock sun.
Or it was.
God has shown this in Revelation outside the Bible.
I really don't give a crap about Revelation. I really don't give a crap about factual things that are stated in the Bible just because they're in the Bible. There are things that are not true, and there are things that are.
Joshua, you were criticizing the book. Hey.
Yes.
You're criticizing the book of Joshua. I gave you evidence for the book of Joshua.
No, I specifically the walls of Jericho.
Go ahead. Yeah, what about them?
Yeah, they weren't there at the time. It was historical fiction that was written far after the fact.
We're talking about Paul, and then we're going 1,500 years before
because I'm showing you lots of holes in the Bible that should, if you are honestly listening, and I hope that you investigate this later, should seriously make you reconsider this strong conviction of an inerrant Bible. But I'm going to pass it to V because I've been on this for way too long.
Andrew, you still with us?
I was going to talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Andrew. So I'm going to circle back a little bit. So it sounds like you are pretty well convinced that the Bible is, in fact, would you say it's inerrant, infallible, both, either or?
Okay. Well, I don't know what you mean by that, but if you mean that God, that the Bible is a history book, yes.
Okay, so you believe that everything in the Bible is true and the inspired word of God?
Correct.
Okay. How did you come to that conclusion?
Through evidence.
Oh, cool. Which evidence?
Of what? The Trinity of God, or or what? What do you mean?
Well, I asked.
We can go. But
We can go
I'm
whichever
assuming you don't
direction you
believe the
want.
first
I
sentence?
would love to get the most convincing piece of evidence that convinced you that the Bible is true. Because if it's convincing, I want to know.
The universe had a beginning. That's Genesis 1:1. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that those two things seem to be similar. Are you saying that every book that says their universe had a beginning is true throughout?
Well, if the Bible was lying, it would probably be wrong in the first sentence if it was written by primitive men, if that's what you believe.
No.
Well, no, actually, I don't like the whole goat herders like argument. I think that that's reductionist and stupid and probably also racist. But my concern here is that I can say, okay, in Tale of Two Cities, right? It starts out, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. There at one point, probably for some person, existed a best time and a worst time. Does that make the Tale of Two Cities true?
If it's talking about the French Revolution, then that book is true, yes.
Okay, so it's talking about the French Revolution, and this is a good comparison, right? There are some similarities. It is based in a historical time period that may have, correlation to reality. Do you think that the characters were real in Tale of Two Cities?
I probably spark noted that book in high school. I don't even remember.
Well, I'll give you a spoiler. It is fiction, so it is actually, the characters were not real, although it was a really gorgeous book. You should read it if you've only sparks noted. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it sounds like your argument is that if the first line of the book is true, the rest of the book is true?
And vice versa. If you don't believe the first line of the book, then you're not going to believe the rest of the book. And then
Cool.
you're going to find ways to criticize Paul. We went to the New Testament, the Old Testament. It's been an entertaining call, to say the least.
Well, and there are a lot of places to go, and I hope you go back and watch this. I'm holding the Book of Eric. The Book of Eric, it says 2 + 2 = 4. Do you believe that is true?
2 + 2 = 4, yes. But
Okay,
I don't
it
know.
also says that Eric created the universe.
Well, that's not true.
Okay, but it says 2 + 2 = 4 first. So obviously, that's fine. See, you're taking this super black and white. No. What you're doing is you're taking this super black and white view that a liar lies all of the time, and so a lying book would only have lies, and that is ridiculous, Andrew.
But I want everyone who's listening to Bart Ehrman and stuff like that, just make sure this is a true statement I'm about to say. No anonymous copies of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have been found. Not one. One. That's a
go
fact.
back and
you question that. You questioned that at the beginning of the call. You questioned that at the beginning of the call. You questioned the authorship, and I gave you evidence that Colossians 4:14, that Luke is mentioned by Paul. I just confirmed Paul and Luke's relationship together. I can use different types of. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead and do the investigation. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Call us back.
No anonymous copies have been found. Hallelujah. Amen. Thank you for taking my call.
That's quite the sign off.
Well, sometimes I think that it's I think sometimes I take that as you're totally used to saying that as a, have a good day kind of thing. That sounded like a fuck you. So fuck you back.
That didn't sound to me so much as a fuck you as a oh shit. But we do kind of know what we're talking about. So I get that. Here's the deal.
Yeah, V, but was I wrong there specifically about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
Well, no, most biblical scholars would agree with you, and I would be very curious to know where he was getting his information from. But the point here is that you can get away with saying these kinds of things to a group of people who already have the same preconceptions as you, who already believe what you believe, and who already share a lot of those suppositions, right? And you can sound like you know what you're talking about because you're saying the right words to that group of people. A good rule of thumb when calling into a show like this is to make sure that if we ask you a question that goes off of your script, you're able to follow through with that and actually follow us along, because that's going to decide whether or not we can actually have a productive conversation, right? We're not going off of a script. We don't want you to go off a script. We want to have a back and forth and figure out where each other stand and maybe come to an agreement about some things. That's really, really hard to do if you expect us to just allow you to go on your script and not ask clarifying questions. And so fair warning for people who call in. That's my approach, at least.
Yeah. And by the way, V, when did those books get the name Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Were they originally called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
No, they were unnamed.
They were unnamed. When did they get their names?
Is this a quiz? I don't know.
Oh, no. We talked about it. It was a council. I forget which one though. Anyway, live chat. Correct us.
I don't think that's actually the Council of Nicaea.
No, not Nicaea.
Okay.
It was anyway. Correct us in the live chat, please. I want to make sure that we get that right.
We should thank patrons.
Is it already time?
It's 2:10.
Oh my gosh, we have so many more callers, and we've got really, really great callers today. Okay. While I reload this, I do want to say some people were saying, "Oh my gosh, why did you take the callers that you took, especially in the last video or last weekend?" We took literally every caller that called in. If you're upset about which callers we take, don't think that we're screening through hundreds of them. We need more callers. So that said, is what it is. All right, you ready for our top 5 patrons?
Yeah, let's do this.
Our top 5 patrons are Eric Tweet, who has been a top patron for such a long time. Eric, thank you. CJ Dennis. Have we had CJ Dennis on before?
I don't think so. Do you know CJ was the name of my first cat and also the name of the objectively best character in the West Wing. So I like CJ.
We might need to fight later.
Oh, come on. Who?
Sam.
What? No.
I love Sam. He's got a heart of gold.
I would accept Toby.
Toby?
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry. Continue.
Okay. Eric Tweet, CJ Dennis. Dingleberry Jackson is in 3rd.
Nice.
Desert Heathen. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And Bethany P. But I think we've got 2 more after 6 and 7. Number 6 is Marry Me V. And number 7.
Wow, hanging in there. Nice.
Is Balaam's Donkey.
Hey, honestly, like $50 is the most I've been paid with a proposal. So like, we'll see where this goes.
So whether you are a top patron or if you're just helping a little bit, every little bit helps. Trust me. As much as we appreciate our top patrons, if we only had 5 large patrons, if one of them needed to duck out for totally understandable reason, we'd be in trouble. It is a lot of the lower end patrons who are able to give us that stability. So if you want to support us, consider going to patreon.com/talkheathen to me. That's patreon.com/talkheathen to me. And Eric Tweet, for those in the live chat, I heard back from Eric Tweet and they said, no, that is the name. That is not saying that I need to tweet. So, all right. What do you think?
David's been waiting for about half an hour. Let's talk with David.
David in Washington. You're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about?
Awesome. I've been kind of wanting to talk about, signs and miracles.
Ooh.
Okay.
Kind of like personal revelation, I guess. Because me personally, I do believe in a God. I don't necessarily say it's a Christian God or whatever, but I do think that you can't prove the Bible to be 100% factual, even if you understood, even if Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, or what you guys talked about, the Old Testament, you can't prove, even if you knew who wrote the Bible, you can't prove that it is true, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, there are a lot of unfalsifiable claims being made in it, so I would agree with you. I don't think necessarily we're asking anyone to prove 100% of the Bible is true. I'd take like the 15-20% that is tied into the whole God concept as being true. If you can prove that, I'm down. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious what you have to say about this personal revelation.
Yeah. So, about a month ago, I was in Orlando with a buddy, and we were on a car garage, parking car garage.
Mhm.
And he's really spiritual. He's Christian, but he was like, I've been praying to God, and I've been wanting God to show me more signs, because he says, why would you believe the Bible for its words if it has no spiritual, thing behind it? That makes no sense.
That's dangerous of him.
Like,
Thou shalt not test the Lord thy God.
yeah.
That's ballsy.
Right. And yeah, I mean, you could debate on, that's true. So out of nowhere, a cross appeared in the sky. And it was like super surreal. And I was like, this is crazy, because I've never experienced anything like that. And I've never seen
cross
anything
appeared in the sky?
Yeah.
Interesting. Can you describe it? Was it the clouds? Was it like a thing of
no,
like was it
kind of.
light?
It was like an imprint of a right. It was like an actually, yeah. It was dark all around, so it was like a dark day. There's Wells Fargo, a bank right there. There's like a skyscraper kind of, and no joke, there's an imprint of a cross, like it's clear as day. And I was like, this is crazy, like no way. So I was just wondering, obviously that isn't evidence, even though we have a picture of the cross because we took a picture of it. I don't know if you guys would see that. I mean,
hey, we have an email. Definitely send that picture. I would be very interested to see what that looked like.
Yeah, because for me and stuff, I would say I'm a skeptic. I don't just because the Bible, like the last guy, he said, just because Genesis 1:1 says that. I mean, just because there might be a truth claim in one book, but does that mean that whole book's true? Absolutely not.
Right.
And even if you find false things in the Bible, like you guys talked about the wall of Jericho and Joshua and stuff, I found that interesting that you have to take that and you have to study it more, right? I'm not just going to take your guys' words. I would actually like to study it. And I hope that guy does too. So I guess my main thing is it's like with personal revelation, you could say like Joseph Smith, right? He saw an angel, or Moroni, or Muhammad saw the angel Gabriel, and you could say Paul saw Jesus. Those are all three. Those are big claims, that started a huge religion and a huge following. Whether that is true, that they had some type of spiritual experience, you can't prove that. So I guess there's no way to, like, I've been watching you guys for a while, but I don't think there's any way that you could show strong evidence for the Bible unless there is signs or these crazy abnormal miracles.
Well, here's my thought here, David. First of all, like, absolutely. If you want to email mail@talkheathen.com with that picture, I am very curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, to the larger point, we had a caller call in, I want to say beginning of last year, during the, like, when we first shut down everything. And they said that they had a vision of the god Bast from Egyptian mythology. And they became a Reformed Church of Reformed Egypt. I do not remember what the name of their religion was. I apologize.
I think Reformed Egyptian is Mormon.
But they converted to a religion based on a vision of a cat god, right? And so we're like, all right, well, that sounds like a trippy experience, and we're not doubting the fact that you had the experience. David, I believe you when you say that that is something that you saw. My concern here is that you used three really good examples that all led to different religions, right? And anybody following one of those is at the risk of incurring the wrath of the other ones. So if everybody in the world had exactly the same vision or personal revelation, and it all led everybody to the same conclusion, that would actually be pretty darn good evidence. But the fact that so many people have so many different visions of so many disparate gods that lead them to different religions and worldviews is part of the problem with personal revelation, because it's not only unfalsifiable in terms of like what actually happened. A lot of it is just contradictory, and there is not a replication process that happens. So those are the two things that kind of don't sit right with me when people bring personal revelation or visions or miracles to the table.
Yeah. I was with I guess Paul in the Bible, when he said that Jesus came to him, because I think that the Bible was written. It was written before the Quran and before Mormonism. And just because something's written, it doesn't mean that's true, other than the other ones. But it was written before those two, right? The Bible.
So Mormonism was much, much later.
Yeah.
And Quran was later as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So when Paul wrote that, I think in Galatians 1:8, right? He says but even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a different gospel than we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. And you mentioned that it's she talk versus he talk. It's like, just because Paul says, if an angel comes to you, right? So Paul didn't see an angel; he saw Jesus. That's what he claims, right? Not saying that's true, but these other two religions saw an angel, Moroni and Gabriel, which is, to me, that's a little interesting, that they didn't have, I guess, a divine being in that sense of a god, not just an angel.
That's interesting, because I believe that in the versions of the Bible that I've read, it's messenger and not angel specifically. And a lot of where I kind of drew that from is, okay, well, Paul, it's a little bit sus, just a tad sus, when someone goes, oh, by the way, someone else is going to show up and they're going to say something different, but don't believe them, they're lying. Like, okay, you can say that. I can say that about anything. That doesn't necessarily prove that I'm right about a thing, right?
No, and I agree that too. I'm just saying that a lot of I see that with a lot of theists, like the guy that called. I watch your guys' show a lot, but I see these like bad. They're horrible claims. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to defend something, even if this is my position. Even if we knew who wrote the Gospels, which we don't, but even if we did, and even if they did that, we can't claim, or we can't even have, I guess, strong evidence to prove that there's a spiritual world, because you'd have to be there in that day to see something happen. Like if I saw a staff turn into a snake, like it says in Exodus, or if I saw Jesus walk on water, that's pretty darn good. You could say, trippy.
But I've also seen David Blaine do it.
Right. David Blaine do it. And I would say, like, there is obviously sleight of hand even in those days. It was running wild and stuff. So easily they could have been deceived. But what would you say to, like, I'm gonna send the picture to the email, because it's insane. Like, I think you guys would be surprised. I'm not saying that that's going to change your guys' thoughts at all. But
hey,
that's the reason
we've been asking for photo evidence. Like, if you've got photo evidence, that is awesome. Send it our way.
And may I ask, are you aware of the phenomenon called pareidolia?
I have not. No.
Okay. So it is an amazing thing to look into, and I'd really love for you to look into it. We as humans are pattern-seeking machines. It is what we do. Evolutionarily, the example that's brought up is, being in a tribe in the savannah around the fire at night, and you think you see a lion and you run, right? And it turns out not to be a lion. Okay, fine. But if it turned out to be, you were the one who survived to pass on your genes. We find patterns all over the place. It's why we see faces in tree trunks, and we see, different shapes and bunnies and clouds. It's just something that we do. We look for, our brains try and create patterns and images that are recognizable, especially when it comes to things that are forefront in our mind. You're going to see crosses all over the place, because two things intersecting is pretty darn common. It's what we as humans do. And so while, again, I'm right there with V, sure, you could experience that. That's absolutely fine. But I don't think that it would necessarily rise to the level of being any more than pareidolia. And I think that if there was a God that wanted us to know about him, it would take that God would do something a little bit better than that. Yeah. And so I think that you should raise your standards so that you should demand better than that, because that pareidolia, it is very easily and reasonably explained naturalistically.
Yeah. So with that and stuff, I think before I go, I'll be quick, but I just want to ask both of you, what is the best, like, I don't know if anybody's ever asked you this, but what, in your opinion, is the best evidence that you've ever come to about a theistic God or a God being? Just real quick from both of you. I just want to know. I don't think it's ever been really asked.
Yeah, this is always an interesting question to get. We have been asked a couple times. My answer, honestly, is that it depends on what you mean by best, because for me, there are arguments that I enjoy the most and have been the most head scratching. Like I had to sit down and talk about it for a couple hours. But at the end of the day, they still didn't lead me anywhere. And in fact, it became very clear that a lot of it was hinged on, fallacy. So two that I really enjoy talking about are modal ontology and also reformed epistemology. Those two are my favorites. I would spend all day talking about both of them if I could. Neither of them are convincing, but props for effort. Those two go a long way.
Yeah, for me particularly modal ontology. If somebody wants to talk about that, oh god, that's another one that I am just super ready. If you believe and want to talk about modal ontology, not you specifically, David, but for people are watching, we want to talk to you.
What is modal on? I've never heard of that ever in my life, but can you explain real quick just what that is? Like a little brief summary.
So we've got a bunch of calls. Really quickly, it's kind of working backwards. So when you talk about ontology, it's different from epistemology. We're talking about what is, and it's kind of working backwards from there. The logic that you're using specifically with modal ontology is necessary and
contingent. Possible,
and necessary.
So there is a whole section of logic called modal logic, and it deals with sets, and it deals with existence, and it deals with determining what things are and what things have to be and what things only sometimes have to be and what things cannot be. And so it can be applied to anything. It's not just about God claims. There are some people who try to take Anselm's original ontological argument and revamp it to
William Lane Craig.
Plantinga, actually.
Kalam? No, Plantinga, you're right.
But
God, you're good.
But it's essentially a big circle, right? So it starts with the idea that God is necessary, and then it leads you through this circle of logical sounding premises back to the conclusion that God is necessary. So when you break it down, it's just a circular argument, but it takes you on a journey for sure.
And it's fun.
So I would definitely look that up. I would look into Scott Clifton's breakdown of the modal ontological argument specifically. He nails it.
Yeah, and for me, I think that what would be most convincing would be if somebody either propped up a watered down kind of God, if you believed in a pantheon that didn't care about us and didn't interact with us and it was just unfalsifiable, then we
could start by eliminating the logical impossibilities, and then maybe we can talk.
Yeah, but other than that, until I find something that is relatively convincing, and I promise you, and I think I can say this for V as well, we promise you, if we come across something that we feel is convincing, we will tell you, and we will wrestle with it and talk about it and deal with it. And if it is convincing, we will change our views because we want to be convinced for good reasons. That said, David, need to.
I like that.
I'm sorry.
I said I like that honesty. Yeah.
I appreciate it, and that's all we ask is the same from the people who call in.
Yep.
Take care, buddy.
Thanks for calling in, David.
Right,
send us that email.
Yep.
All right. We've only got time for a couple more calls.
Okay. So let's go to
Krishan?
Krishan, is that what we're getting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Krishan. Thank you for waiting.
Hi, Krishan in New Jersey. You're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about?
Hello, Eric and V. How you guys doing?
We are good. We want to make
Hello?
sure to get to a couple more calls before we end, but we want to make sure we're touching on your question. So what have you got for us?
All right. So, unfortunately, I'm not as organized as some of these other guys, but I was curious about, like what merits reasonable belief. So I am an atheist, and I'm not religious. I haven't been religious since I was like 10. And I still kind of hit certain gray areas when I think about what I believe and whether or not it is reasonable. Because, I mean, like, if I'm going to break it down, I think reasonable belief comes from either evidence or arguments, right?
Ideally, a combination of the two. But I think, yeah, I guess, what would you define as reasonable?
So, like, would you say something is reasonable to believe on argument's sake alone without evidence?
Pending any other evidence to the contrary, I would say that it would be reasonable to entertain the hypothesis. So I don't know if I would say that I would put my stamp on it as yes, this is true. But if there was no other evidence to the contrary and it was just a convincing argument that was both valid and sound, then sure, we could talk about it as a real possibility until further evidence was, brought to the table.
Right. But so when we're talking about belief in particular, right, I don't think we're really talking about the things that we do know. Because when it comes to evidence, it's like not so much a belief as it is knowledge.
Interesting. Right? Okay, so like there's actually a huge conversation around which comes first and where do we classify these. And I think I differ from a lot of people. Because a lot of people say that belief is a subset of knowledge. So you know things, and then belief is you really, really, really know things. Isn't that, is it flipped? Am I flipping it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So belief is that which you accept to be true. Yeah. Knowledge, and I don't like the term at all, but the way I understand knowledge is often people use the JTB description of justified true belief. So not only do you accept it to be true, but you're also showing your justification, and it happens to be true. Because you can believe untrue things, but knowledge kind of would be that next step of it also being true.
Okay. So, I mean, if I know you guys are short on time, so kind of just to get to the heart of the matter, right? I've heard a few things you guys have, I don't know who said particularly, but I kind of like them. I don't know that I can completely abide by them, right? Which is you're either convinced of something or you're not. Belief isn't a choice, right? And the time to believe is when you have evidence, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that kind of go ahead.
I agree with you. I think that we are maybe a little bit guilty of equivocation there, because the time to believe something without evidence, people believe things without evidence all the time, including us, just because they're trivial. If you claim to know a thing without evidence, that would be a problem. Or if the belief would influence your existence to a point where it would require evidence to be taken on board. I think honestly, Krishan, you have a good point, and I'd be willing to concede that, honestly.
Can I offer to rephrase it a little bit?
Go for it.
Cool. So Krishan, it totally depends on how important it is to you. So if I told you I had a croissant sandwich for breakfast this morning, how much evidence would you need to believe me to accept that statement to be true? Probably just my word, because it really doesn't matter. But if I were, say, wanting to take your money and invest it and say, hey, I've got this really, really great, setup where if you invest your money with me, I'm going to triple it in about 3 months. That's also a claim, but I don't think you would be that ready to accept it.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm sorry.
The importance of it.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. The importance of it really depends on how much you need to, how much it impacts you. And so vetting things and also, by the way, this idea that it's, belief is somehow binary. We have degrees of confidence. You have degrees of confidence in a thing.
Exactly.
And so as long as you are saying, hey, I have a high degree of confidence in this thing, you could still be wrong. But if you have a high degree of confidence in that thing, you are going to be accepting that thing to be true. And so it's kind of it makes things gray because unfortunately the world is a whole lot more shades of gray than it is black and white, and it's not a satisfactory answer, but it's true.
Right. So that the only thing is that, based on that of how it's relevant, right? If someone was to say they believed in a creator, and I am an atheist, right? I'm not trying to go down this so crazy, but I talk to other theists too, and they make me question their, reasoning sometimes. If someone said they believed in a creator, not that he invades our lives or anything like that, it's completely irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And it has no evidence necessary.
Honestly, that part is why I use the term agnostic atheist, is because it is unfalsifiable to claim that a deist God exists. So you can't prove it, but it's also unfalsifiable the other way around. So you can't not prove it 100%. So I'm perfectly willing to entertain the possibility, if somebody brings me sufficient evidence, that there is a deist God out there somewhere. The problem there becomes it can't be proven or disproven. Therefore, why would someone believe in it?
Can I take issue with both of you just a tiny little bit? And I know this is gonna. It's just a nitpick that's going to eat us alive in the comments if I don't address it. And that is, we've had a biblical inerrantist call in. And if somebody calls in and literally believes that a God has omnipotence, omnibenevolence, omniscience, did I say omnipotence?
Yes, you did.
I'm missing one. Omnipresence. There we go. If you believed that omni-God exists, you can absolutely prove that does not exist.
Oh, absolutely.
So long as we're talking about,
yeah,
so long as we're talking about gray area where people are kind of wishy-washy, I absolutely think that applies, and I think that happens more often than not. But I would not make the blanket statement saying that we cannot disprove a God, because we can disprove every God that has claims that are absolutely illogical, and we often do. So just so long as that caveat is there, I'm sure you have that implied, and Christian, you have that implied, but I really don't want to read the comments like that. Just don't at me, bro, to the people in the comments.
Yeah.
That said,
no,
we do
agreed.
have
I mean, once you start go ahead. I said, once you start attributing the whatever creator you with all types of stuff, it's like, then you really run into a lot of problems.
Right. The second you give any attribute to a God, it becomes falsifiable, and then you have a problem. Right. So as long as it's out there somewhere, who doesn't touch us, doesn't interact with us, can't be proven, cool. But also you've given up your case, essentially, which is why process theology is so interesting to me, because it does get rid of a lot of the logical fallacies. It gets rid of the problem of evil. But in exchange for all of that, getting rid of those logical fallacies, they give up the possibility of falsifying the claim itself. And so becomes just kind of mental masturbation.
And now we have a process theologian who's going to call back. I'm very excited about this.
Please
Christian,
call in.
We've got more callers to take, but thank you for calling in. Hope this helped.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So here's the deal. Shannon on the line, I really want to take your call in the Discord. Stay on the line, because we are going to be, we can transfer and do all of that on our end. Kevin in New York in the meantime. Kevin, you're live with Eric and V.
Please don't make us regret taking you on this time, Kevin. What have you got for us today?
All right, I'm beating myself up because I called in so late, but this is what I wanted to talk about, and I realized I kind of said it wrong because about what I called in about. It's just that I agree with you that it's actually an author when talking about some of the books within the New Testament, that it's not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Kevin, hold on a second.
Hold on.
I'm so happy that calling with a correction and saying, hey, you know what, I was wrong about something, takes a ton of character. And I'm so dang proud of you. Kevin, thank you. thank you for calling in about that. I know we don't have too much time, but the fact that you would call in about that and continue to engage like that was freaking beautiful.
This is why I keep talking to you.
In the meantime,
the canonization process of the Bible is all wrong in my opinion. And
I agree, but I just don't think we have the time today. So unfortunately, we're going to have to pick that up, but call back in and we can talk about it.
All right. Yeah, I'll definitely call back in and talk about it.
Sounds
call
good.
in earlier.
Take care. Someone says, who gave Eric the soundboard? I've had the soundboard. I've been waiting. But in the meantime, I really do want to take that call in the Discord.
Yeah, we should hop over there.
This has been a lot of fun.
We had theist callers almost the entire time. That
we did.
Hardly ever happens.
I'm really, really happy about that. Any other debriefing things before we
I think we're good. Although I do want to amend our first shout out a little bit because vaccines are rolling out. So there's an added request for you guys. Okay. Wash your hands, social distance, wear a mask, and get the vaccine when it comes up. Doesn't matter which one. They're all effective. They're all going to do their job. They're going to keep you healthy. They're going to keep other people healthy. And then once you do, keep wearing a mask. Surprise. Switcheroo.
Simply because until we reach herd immunity, you could still give it to other people. So that said, you ready for love rings?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. All right. That is from our amazing crew. Can we move over to crew cam? There is no way we would be able to do this show without this amazing crew. Hey, everybody. Nice shirt, Ethan. Hey, thank you all so much. There's no way we'd be able to do this. Those people are the ones who are working so hard, and they deserve so much more than, oh gosh darn it, we lost that caller. They deserve so much more than they get. Most of us are volunteers. We do have 2 people now. We've got our producer and associate producer.
Yep.
And we're really, really happy about that. They're helping make sure that this is running smoothly because this is a volunteer effort. It has been. We haven't made any money and our volunteers haven't been making any money.
Well, we do get Grubhub on the house afterwards.
This is true.
So it's not money, but we want to be upfront with you guys. Be 100%.
Yeah. We're eating Indian food later. So cheers for that. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for our volunteers. Everybody who's working hard behind the scenes. Tangel, that means you. Kristen, that means you. Stidix, and everybody else who's working hard. Thank you so much. We love you. For those of you who, whether you believe or disbelieve, like we said, things are changing. And I'm really excited for us to get back to a world where we can interact. I have always been a hugger. And the fact that I'm going to be afraid to breaks my heart. But I want to live in a world where it can happen again.
Wear a mask so Eric can hug people again.
Please, because when you meet me, if you want
to
a hug, I'll hug you. I just
some McLaughlin music playing.
In the arms of the angels. Yeah. If you disbelieve, hey, even if you don't disbelieve, if you've been watching and you're enjoying this and you want to be a part of this community, we're freaking building it. And we're so glad you made it. And hey, this may not be the community for you. Maybe you hop in and you go, this isn't the right thing for me. That is okay. Find what works for you. There are people who I see in the live chat go, man, Eric is the most annoying POS I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, I agree. Absolutely. We don't need to be your favorites, but find ones that are. Find those voices. And if you don't see those voices, be that voice, create it and grow this community because we need that. We can't all just exist in these little bubbles. We need different groups. And so find that community of yours. But for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. See you next week.